So if you were to take everything from Amazfit's T-Rex 3, like dual band GPS, the long battery life, the offline maps, and the large display, and then add a titanium bezel, a sapphire lens, a microphone and speaker, as well as a built-in LED flashlight, well, then you'd have this. So this is the new T-Rex 3 Pro. So Amazfit's T-Rex 3 is a really capable watch considering its price, $279. And if you haven't checked out my in-depth review of it, I'll have that linked down in the description below. It's definitely got some quirks for sure, but it's kind of hard to nitpick also considering the price. But with the T-Rex 3 Pro, so they've added some pretty substantial features here with both materials as well as functionality that make it a more capable sports watch. And this is going to come in at $399, so $120 more than the original. And the original T-Rex 3 isn't going away, by the way. This is just more like the pro level version, just kind of like how Garmin came out with their pro level version of the Fenix 8. Different kind of price points for sure, but you get what I'm saying. So I've been testing the T-Rex 3 Pro for a few weeks now, and in this video, I'll be sharing what's worked well for me as well as what I think could be improved. And if you do find the information in this video to be useful, just do me a favor and hit that like button down below. It's a small thing that you can do that'll help this video and the channel out quite a bit, and I appreciate it. All right, so first up, they upgraded the materials where this new Pro model gets a titanium bezel and buttons versus the stainless steel that's found in the standard version. The main case is still plastic though, but the bezel and buttons are now titanium. And another thing they've upgraded is that this now has a sapphire lens for increased scratch resistance versus the Gorilla Glass on the original. It is still kind of recessed though, just like the original, so the bezel does add a little bit of extra protection for the lens. Now, these T-Rexes, just like the actual dinosaur, are not necessarily small by any means, and they're comfortable for me with my 185mm circumference wrist, but they're still on the larger side of things with a 48mm case. The good news is that they're introducing a new smaller size with this Pro version where they're going to have both this 48mm size as well as a new 44mm version. Now on this 48mm model, so this has the same size 1.5-inch display as the original, but this display does get a bump in brightness where this has a peak brightness of 3000 nits versus 2000 nits on the original. But I didn't necessarily have problems on the original, but this version is just brighter now. And then battery life is rated to be anywhere from like 10 to 25 days, at least on this larger version, depending on your settings. Like if you choose to use the always on display, there's like sleep tracking settings, as well as how many outdoor activities that you track. And I usually like to just turn everything on when I test things just to see if they actually work. And even with an average of like an hour or 2 hours of outdoor activities per day, I've been getting easily like a week and a half out of it. Battery life is really decent for sure. And then when it comes to battery life for tracking outdoor activities, so there's going to be a broad range here as well, depending on your settings, but the T-Rex 3 Pro does also have a smart mode for tracking outdoor activities where it can automatically choose the most appropriate GPS setting during your activity based on conditions. So let's say you start out in the wide open. It can use a lower accuracy setting since there's nothing really obstructing a clear view of the sky, but then later on, let's say if you start to get into an area where there's like heavy tree cover or tall buildings, it can automatically switch to a higher accuracy mode. And while I was testing it using this setting, so I was getting anywhere from like 27 hours to 37 hours of battery life while also using the always on display. But again, this particular setting, it is going to be variable based on your conditions, so your results may vary. Now, since smart recording can be variable, I also tested this by forcing it into the highest accuracy mode. And here's where I got right around 27 hours of expected battery life, but again, using the always on display. But comparing the battery life of the highest accuracy mode to the smart mode, so that means that was likely switching to the higher accuracy setting on a lot of those activities using the smart mode, but a lot of those activities were kind of like road rides out in the wide open. So maybe a little bit of optimization there to have a better balance of battery life and accuracy. And then on the smartwatch side of things, so this also comes with a microphone as well as a speaker. So the original did come with a microphone, which was kind of interesting where you could do things like access the voice control functions. But the T-Rex 3 Pro also adds a speaker, which just kind of like makes nicer tones all around, but you can also do stuff like speak out your workout summaries.
Distance 48.86 miles.
And even provide audible turn-by-turn alerts.
60 yards. Turn sharp left.
And then you can also use that speaker and microphone with your phone to take calls, and this does work with an iPhone, by the way. How close are you to your microphone at this point?
I'm literally almost licking it.
So I'm like normal distance, like I would say 10 inches away right now, and then now I'm like super close. So how do I sound now?
You sound exactly the same, just as bad as before.
Oh, man. Okay.
Do I sound better or not really?
You sound okay. You're clear, but not loud. So it could be on both ends, I guess. It could be the microphone, it could be the speaker. Who knows? Now, a pretty big new feature in my opinion is this new built-in LED flashlight where all you have to do to enable it is long press this upper left-hand button right here, and there's a new flashlight at the top of the watch. And it also does have different light levels and also has a red mode for use at night. And then in addition to that, it also has an SOS mode that you can enable where it can switch to a flashing pattern in case of emergency. Now, this feature was first introduced by Garmin years ago, and it was one of those features that at first I was like, a flashlight? Really? But it has hands down been the feature that I use on a daily basis that I completely miss when I switched to another watch for testing. It's just incredibly handy in tons of situations, whether that's just kind of like stumbling around to get to the bathroom in the middle of the night, taking the dog for a walk, and of course outside at night for more visibility. Heck, I even just used it on a trail run I did last week where I had to kind of like go through a dark tunnel. And then when it comes to sleep tracking, so Amazfit has been a little bit notorious, I guess you could say, for giving overly positive sleep scores where I could have some horrific sleep and it would still be like, hey, great job on your 3 hours of sleep. And sleep scores have definitely gotten better for sure. And I have to say that it does do a solid job at tracking the time I went to bed, as well as the time I woke up, and any awake periods throughout the night. But I still do think that these are a little bit inflated, where like on this night here, where I had to wake up in the middle of the night to publish a video, it still gave me a pretty good sleep score for some reason. I may have gotten a lot of total sleep that night, but I still sort of felt like garbage the next morning. Now, moving on to the more sports side of things. So the Pro version also has offline maps to help give context of your location while you're doing your outdoor activity, but something they're actually introducing here are points of interest, including landmarks, trailheads, bodies of water, as well as labels for streets and trails. And in addition to that, you can also search for points of interest for navigation. So to do this, you'll first go into the map app, and then from there, as soon as it gets your location via GPS, you can then search for points of interest around you, like let's say restaurants, coffee shops, entertainment, and a bunch of other landmarks they have built in. And it can sort these by proximity, so you can definitely get to that well-deserved coffee as soon as you can. And then you can choose one of these points of interest and then can attempt to create an ideal route to get there. And I'd say that for the most part, it did a good job in choosing an appropriate path to get there, where these actually did make sense in terms of the more like bike-friendly routes. There were some points of interest though where it kind of like had some errors creating the route. There were just like some locations where it couldn't necessarily calculate an appropriate route for some reason. And this also can happen, by the way, on other devices that can create on-demand routes, but it seemed to be a little bit more frequent here. But one thing I'd say here though is that on-demand turn-by-turn routing is a pretty complex feature overall, and being that this is just being introduced, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of improvements as time goes on. And another thing that they're introducing is a round-trip route creator for walking, running, as well as cycling, where you can choose a desired distance as well as a desired direction of travel and can attempt to create a round-trip route based on your criteria. And this was definitely a bit more hit and miss, where on some occasions it did build a decent route on roads and paths that actually did make sense, and then some others it looked like kind of like a kid with a crayon that just had like too much sugar or something like that. And then just like the point of interest route creation, there were also some kind of like route calculations that I experienced there. But again though, these are hard features to implement and something that only like Garmin, Wahoo, and Hammerhead have at this point, where companies like Chorus, Suunto, and Polar don't have at all. So it is impressive that they're actually rolling this out, but this is also something that kind of like evolves over time. And by the way, this was done on the watch itself. I actually turned off Bluetooth on my phone just to make sure that I was testing the actual functionality on the watch itself without connecting to the app. But another thing is that these tools are only available from the map app in the list of the available apps, but these aren't navigation features that are available within sport profiles, which I think would make a lot more sense. But I think that should be an easy thing to kind of fix, where just adding those functions within the navigation features in the sport profiles. And then you can also load in predetermined routes just like before for navigation, where it can give you turn-by-turn directions. And since this also has a built-in speaker, you can also get audible alerts as well.
60 yards. Turn sharp left.
Now, there's definitely some quirks though when it comes to navigation, where I find it gives way too many alerts, like streets that could just kind of like turn left just slightly, or trails that may just have like a slight curve or something like that, where it actually will still like give me an alert.
55 yards. Turn slight right.
Like I definitely want an alert if it's going to be like a sharp turn or an actual junction in the trail, but it seems like their turn alerts are a bit too frequent. And another thing, and this is probably a bigger issue, is that when I use navigation for cycling, both the map as well as the turn alerts were like 5 seconds behind. So the map page showed me like 20 feet behind where I was actually at, and the turn alerts also came in pretty late.
57 yards. Turn left. Turn left.
Like it was saying like turn ahead in like 40 feet, but I was already at the turn and had to kind of like turn suddenly.
Turn right. Turn right.
Now, I didn't have this issue while trail running though, where I was going slower, but for cycling, there was a delay at anything like higher speed than running. And there's also supposed to be an automatic reroute feature if you go off route, where it should automatically recalculate your route to get you back on track. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work on my watch for some reason, and I've been doing some troubleshooting with the Amazfit, but we don't necessarily know why at this point. But putting that aside, this is what it's supposed to look like. But what I would say though is that it's not necessarily automatic, where if you do deviate off route, you actually have to pause the activity, go down the navigation settings, and then ask it to recalculate a route. So not automatic. Oh, and then one more thing, and this is actually what Amazfit sent in their kind of like troubleshooting, is that you actually have to deviate from the route by at least 500 meters, I think they said, which is quite a bit to be able to like recalculate the route. And on the GPS side of things, so the T-Rex 3 Pro has a dual band satellite chipset just like the original, and it also has a smart mode where it can automatically switch between satellite modes based on the conditions. So if you're out in the wide open, it can use a lower accuracy mode, and then if you start to get into an area where something may obstruct a view of the sky, it can automatically switch to a higher accuracy mode. And this is similar to what Garmin has done with their Auto Select or Sat IQ mode, where the aim here is to have the best balance of accuracy versus battery life based on the conditions around you. And for the total distance that it collected, that was almost always very close to the other devices. However, there were just a couple activities where it was slightly lower than the other devices. And we'll figure out why here in just one second. So I usually start out with cycling with GPS tracks, but I'm actually going to go ahead and leave that till a bit later. So let's first start with some trail running. And so with this trail run here, some pretty good stuff out of the T-Rex 3 Pro. Pretty tight and accurate as we go up the trail, and very much in line with the other devices. And as I started to descend, maybe a little bit of corner cutting on this corner right here, but then for the rest of the run, really good stuff and good to go. However, I had an even harder test for it, where on this run, it had to deal with a lot more, like lots of tree cover, as well as plenty of areas where I was right up next to a rock wall and actually under some rock faces at times. And as you can see here, it did an okay job for the most part as we started out. Now right here, I was actually under a waterfall for a second, and it did a pretty good job at not getting like too crazy as it didn't have a clear view of the sky. And then for quite some time, it was holding really steady and relatively close to the trail, as well as the other devices with similar technology. Now over here is where I went through that tunnel I was talking about earlier, and you can see that it lost the signal just like the other devices would, of course, but it did a good job at reacquiring the signal as I exited. There's a little bit of deviation on the trail here as I started to descend, and a little bit off the trail here too, but all in all, I think it did a really good job for being able to switch between modes when it needed to, at least on this run. So those activities were at relatively lower speeds with running, but now let's check out some cycling, and it looks good from a high level, but as soon as we start to look at these tight corners and curves, you can see that it's cutting in on a lot of these, as well as kind of like overshooting quite a few of them as well. Now on this ride here, so this is the ride where it was a little bit more off than the other devices in regards to the total distance. And if we take a close look at the GPS track, so right here, it kind of went off the path for a little bit after this corner, but right here is where I went in and out of a tunnel. And as you can see, it had a hard time reacquiring the signal after I exited. So when it comes to GPS accuracy using that smart mode, I'd say it's great for running for sure, but when it comes to cycling at those higher speeds, I'd probably encourage you to use the highest accuracy mode. And I did test that as well, and it's plenty accurate with that highest accuracy mode. Now, when it comes to elevation gain using the barometric altimeter, so on a couple activities, it was spot on, but then on this ride here, the elevation reported was quite a bit higher, but I'd actually have to say for the most part that on most occasions, it reported a little bit low. And then when it comes to heart rate accuracy, so let's go and first start out with something on the easier side of things with some indoor cycling. It's generally an easy activity for watches to get right since there's not really many variables to deal with, and the T-Rex 3 Pro did a really good job here. Like on the steady state ride, basically perfect, except for a couple little spots like here or there where it wandered. And then on this interval session here, other than like this spot at the beginning and maybe a little couple wiggles here, really great job overall. Now moving it outside, so this is where we start to throw more things for a watch to deal with, like gripping onto handlebars as well as bumps and vibrations from the road. And this is where things start to stray a bit. Like on this ride, overall pretty good, but you can see some spots where the heart rate drifted a bit, but did get back in line rather quickly. And then on this ride, again, for the majority of the ride, it was actually pretty decent, but did have a longer spot here where it got thrown off the plot. But on this ride here, I saw more problems here where there's some longer spots where the heart rate drifted. However, I do have to say that this was a little bit rougher gravel ride where there were a lot more bumps than the other rides. So there were certainly more things for the watch to deal with. Now, one thing I actually wanted to note though is that even though this watch fits me from a comfort standpoint, with the size and the way the watch straps are designed, there's actually still a little bit of a gap though where I think it's actually preventing the watch from being super snug when I wear it. So that could be a factor there. So I'll be super interested to see how the smaller one performs. And then when it comes to running, so this looks pretty good overall, but here at the end, so this is what appears to be a cadence lock, where the heart rate actually misinterprets the rhythm of your footsteps as heart rate. And this is an anomaly that can happen on some heart rate sensors depending on the watch, but the rest of the run actually did pretty well. However, on this trail run, so this is where we can actually see that cadence lock was more apparent, where on the first half here, so this was basically going straight uphill and on one of my favorite trails where it's so steep that I can actually barely even run. So with something this steep, you're not really bouncing like you would normally do when you're actually like running. However, on the second half, so this is where I was going downhill where there's a lot more impact, and this is where it started to get thrown off with that cadence lock. And then for weight training, so this actually isn't bad for weight training, at least when it comes to watches. Weight training is probably one of the holy grails when it comes to wrist-based optical heart rate sensors, since the watch is actually not a great place to track heart rate. With this kind of activity, especially since we're tensing our wrists by gripping onto dumbbells, and we also have a lot of bearing arm movement, which can also throw off these sensors. So it had some issues with these bench presses at the beginning and the chest flies in the middle, but for the rest of the workout, it did fairly well, including the intervals at the end. So heart rate accuracy for me was like in the so-so department, not necessarily unusable by any means, and some decent results out of it, but not necessarily the best out there either. But the good news is you can pair it up with an external heart rate strap to get more accurate heart rate if you like. And you can even use their own Helio band as an external heart rate source, and their Helio band is actually pretty solidly accurate, especially if you wear it on the arm with their new bicep strap. And I've got more details on the Helio band accuracy linked down in the description below. So just like the original T-Rex 3, this new Pro model is quite simply a fantastic deal for what it offers, but just like the T-Rex 3, it also has some quirks as well, and it mainly surrounds the new features around navigation, which are again really complex problems to figure out, but they don't seem to be there quite yet. I think they probably should have waited to roll out those features, but it is still impressive that they have gone down this, well, route, since basically only Garmin has this sort of functionality on watches right now. And again, you can't really find other watches at this price point with these features, yet alone the built-in flashlight. And I have seen them updating the original T-Rex 3 with software updates and improvements, so they are definitely putting work into already released devices, so that gives me hope that this will also be improved as well. Anyhow, if you have any questions about the T-Rex 3 Pro I didn't cover in this video, feel free to drop a comment down in the comment section down below, and on your way down there, do me a favor and also hit that like button, and also subscribe to the channel for tons more sports tech videos that are coming up soon. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.